Good morning. This is the first episode of the Centrist Perspective podcast. My name is Mikal Jenkins. I am a policy analyst with the New Jersey Council of County Colleges, accompanied by Muhamed Alic. Muhammad, introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. It's 11 a.m., so basically almost noon. I'm Muhammad Alic. It's a pleasure to be able to introduce myself to you guys. I am part two, or I guess the second half of this podcast, and I'm excited to to talk about what we've got to offer today, Michael.
For this podcast, the premise is to let our viewers know kind of the angle that we're going for. It's a bi-weekly podcast delivering thoughtful, centrist analysis on current political and cultural issues with a focus on state and federal dynamics. Each episode will mirror these different issues and concerns that are going on within the nation in several states, such as New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. And we'll be offering unique perspectives in a conversational and accessible format. And to start off our conversation today, what we're going to focus on is going to be the recent Supreme Court rulings by the Trump administration and the Supreme Court currently.
Some interesting ones. I see the news headlines throwing around a lot of interesting headlines. I saw one. It was the court deciding to end birthright citizenship. I thought that was the juiciest headline I saw and quite far from the truth. So with that said, Michael, can you actually explain to us what that Supreme Court decision was about? The one relating to the national injunctions and Trump's, the court's using them against Trump.
Yes, that was actually ruled on yesterday. Actually, 6-3 ruling along ideological lines, of course, significantly limiting the ability of lower courts to issue nationwide injunctions against executive orders.
So for for those that aren't in the know, what is an
Yes, yeah.
injunction?
So a national injunction is where the president can write an executive order or make a policy. Let's just say in this case it is the deportations. An injunction stops that ruling currently in its place. It's basically an injunction is where a group of individuals file a collective lawsuit on that claim from the executive order, and that eventually stops that order. So that now those federal judges have lost that power. That power has now been limited, and the executive power has now been expanded. And this isn't the first instance of this. We'll get to that first instance, but let's dive more into this current ruling. So the ruling is described in the media as a major victory for the Trump administration, curtailing the power of district judges to block policies nationwide, impacting over 300 federal lawsuits challenging Trump's executive orders since the start of the second term. Now, to provide some context and impact on what this can truly mean, this stemmed from challenges to Trump's executive orders attempting to end the birthright citizenship for children of undocumented or temporary legal residents. While the court did not rule on the constitutionality of the order itself and instructed lower courts to avoid broad injunctions and focus on relief for specific individuals. So that basically means that it's now no longer a large group of individuals that will have to bring a case. Only individuals can now bring these cases. So that now will lead to a lot more lawsuits being made on these injunctions. Justice Amy Coney Barrett, writing for the majority, argued the universal injunctions were not anticipated by the nation's founders and lack congressional authorization. Justice Sotomayor, in dissent, warned that the ruling endorsed the radical proposition that the president is irreparably harmed whenever restrained from potentially unlawful actions, shifting power toward the executive branch. And I kind of want to hit that first piece that I was talking about, and that is the expansion of the official powers of the president. So that ruling was back in the early months of the Trump administration. Basically, any unofficial acts of the president were deemed congressionally approved, and he would have no cases brought against him. So we are now seeing this Supreme Court expand the powers
So
of
yeah,
the executive branch.
now
And
the
it's and I know they've already continue on.
Yeah, that was a pretty controversial one when Trump first came in the office, was them deciding that, what he did as president was legal. And I remember, I think it was Nixon, Richard Nixon, who said it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he said, "Whatever I do as president is legal." You know what I mean? Like, a president quite literally said that, like, nothing I do is illegal. I'm the president. Which I think's funny, especially when you apply it to today's, modern political atmosphere. It's a lot of people talk about how, things like what's going on today have never been done before. Like some people
Yep.
throw away the words like fascism or just, political extremism is really just a blanket way of saying that. But really, we've seen this happen multiple times in terms of the executive branch really trying to use their power as much as they can. And it's nothing new, and just I want to add that little bit of interesting history onto this talk, and I also want to ask you a question, Michael, before you even dwell deeper into the topic. Is Do you think that two things? Do you think that this will enable future presidents, such as even Democratic presidents, to start reaching over with this federal power? And two, do you think that on a actual individual basis that there will be moments of this being found to be unconstitutional?
So I definitely can see it being unconstitutional down the line, but I would tie that to your first question. I think can become constitutional down the line dependent upon how it's used.
Yeah.
I think, especially on the presidential immunity piece as well. So if a Democrat president in office wanted to make some radical, changes or make some radical policies,
Gun
they
law, for
would have,
example.
yeah, like how Kamala Harris was saying, the gun buyback.
Yeah.
That would fall under this presidential immunity.
Yeah.
So these are the dangers that can happen as the Supreme Court opens up this Pandora's box and letting the Trump administration get these wins. Now, I understand that they can be, legality wins, constitutional wins, and they seem great in certain, constitutionalist eyes. But looking at the grand scheme and the precedent that this, sets forth for other presidents down the line, and Trump hasn't used it yet, I would say. In his most recent acts, I haven't noticed it being used as presidential immunity, but when it is used, that will set further precedent to how it can be used, which
Yeah.
Democrats would be able to, almost free reign at that point,
Yeah.
given to what the Republicans do. So that's why I think the Republicans are not going as full force with after this ruling, but now they're definitely going full force with the birthright citizenship
Yeah.
ruling as well. They are ramping up illegal immigration operations throughout the whole entire state.
No.
So we will be seeing that impact throughout the next few weeks and months, without a doubt.
Now, what I think is interesting, and in the grand scheme of things, is that what a lot of people don't know and almost don't believe is that Biden deported more people than Trump has in his first term, and so far on per capita on his second term on rate. But the thing is, they due to Trump's extremely strong anti-immigration public stance, people quite literally just stopped coming into the country. People would be coming in by like the hundreds of thousands across the border under Biden, monthly. But under Trump, those numbers dwindled to very little. So it's interesting
Yeah.
talking about his birthright citizenship plan. For those of you who don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but essentially Trump's just trying to say that if you are born in this country to somebody who is here illegally, you're not a citizen. It's because that person wasn't legally here in the first place. And
Yes.
and that hasn't been decided whether or not that's constitutional or not, and that's what the courts will probably iron out over the next few years, honestly. They But with that said, even with that birthright citizenship plan, being thrown out there, there has been evidence of citizens, U.S. born citizens who are currently citizens, being caught up in Trump's, immigration
Yeah.
policy and then getting detained or even sometimes deported, or people who are here legally and permanent residents getting here deported illegally. Yeah, and I wanted to bring that up. Has there been any, pushing forward for lawsuits in these cases? Because I personally don't know, I haven't been following up with this as much as I should have. So I want to see if you know personally, like, has there been any of these lawsuits on an individual basis that have come up? And, what's the status of them if you are aware?
Yes. So actually, with this Supreme Court case, it was a lower court case that got up to the Supreme Court. I forget the individual's name, but he was a U.S. citizen that was deported, actually, wrongfully deported.
Yeah.
And I do believe a few weeks back, DHS Secretary Christine Noman, I believe, she was getting grilled by
I hate that
the
woman. I'll say
she
that
was getting
publicly. I hate that woman.
she was getting ridiculed by the committee on the policies and procedures that DHS was following when conducting these raids.
Yeah.
As little as certain tattoos that an individual may have that they think is gang related, or even if you look gang related, they are taking you. And this is what I'm reading in the news, whether it's on X or on more bipartisan sites as well. And this is why these injunctions were happening.
Very bootleg,
Individuals were seeing, yeah, everyone was seeing their, next door neighbor, their, individuals that see the grocery store, getting picked up, even though they're not illegal immigrants. So that's where the issue lies. And it's this massive sweep that Trump's doing that he's not realizing and clarifying to ICE and or DHS, the individuals that need to go out. Because if I'm not mistaken, in the beginning, it was just supposed to be the criminals, the violent criminals.
Yeah.
But now we're noticing it's not the violent criminals. They're going to the Home Depots. They're going to your
The work.
grocery outlets. They're going to the
Yeah.
workers. And then, now we've seen that he actually changed it to where he gave, I think there was an injunction for workers to where they actually, for farm workers, to where they actually could stay. So he understood he was hurrying, the farm, his voting base, basically,
Yeah.
and made that change. And it is a good change. Don't get me wrong. The farmers, they need those farmers and hotels need those immigrant workers. And I know Trump for sure understands the hotel piece of that. Um, but I do think more lawsuits will come. The Supreme Court will definitely continue to hear them.
No.
And with this ruling on the birthright citizenship, it only depends on how far they actually go. And hopefully these individuals can come back home. I mean, as the ruling stands, it seems like it's not the case. But we will see as time changes.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to mention because you brought up the Trump quite literally saying that they were going to avoid farm workers and such of that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's based his own what is it? His own administration. The Trump officials behind the ICE and DHS. They have come out and said they're still going to do that, despite what Trump has said. So, and there is actually reports of farm employers saying that they have been impacted by this and they're working together to get Trump to reverse his policy on this, which is
Yeah.
interesting to think about because now a lot of people want to talk about how Trump's out of control. Right now, it almost seems like ICE is out of control of even Trump, and I mean, these people are acting on their own behalf, what they believe is right almost, because we see even in the case of, Kilmore Garcia, they're keeping him in jail because the courts believe ICE will show up and deport him the moment they let him out of jail. And then the courts say, "There's like, we're gonna do about that." Courts like, "We can't do anything about that. Like, we physically can't stop them if they don't want to listen to us." So it brings in an interesting idea of, one reason why, and we'll get back to talk more about the court cases because we still have the Maryland one as well to discuss down. But I think it's interesting to talk about how a lot of people believe this is a big stance of my political policy is just, less federal government leads to less of these issues. These people won't be held accountable. No way. There isn't going, in my opinion, there isn't going to be a single ICE official, single political official who, despite clearly breaking the constitutional law, will have any kind of jail time for it or any kind of punishment. I think that it's a thing that frustrates people. And a lot of the time when I tend to lean Democrat on social issues, like especially a big one being Medicare for all. But I think things like that, whenever a lot of my, left leaning people that I speak about who want to talk about expanding, the political expanding executive power, these are the
Mhm.
things that come with it. These issues of these people, these political figures, these administrations being able to do whatever they believe is right, and they're never going to be held accountable for it. Now, we can even go back. This isn't anything new. I mean, we can go back to even the rich and powerful in the Great Recession, 2008, the housing crisis. You know what I mean? They made a whole movie, a fantastic movie about The Big Short that describes about how these people were quite literally gambling and forcing people on the business side to listen to their own desires so they could get more rich off of the American people's backs.
Yep.
And nobody went to jail for that, despite it affecting so many people, being extremely illegal, and predatory. And to bring that back to my current point is that these courts have really given, as you mentioned, Trump a lot of leeway now with what he can and can't do. And considering the fact that we're seeing ICE and Trump even going off not off the haywire, for example, not like levels of narrow, watching Rome burn as he dances and plays the flute. But it seems like that, it's gotten to the point where Republicans have seen some internal turmoil regarding the big, beautiful bill, especially with those Medicaid cuts. We've seen, Trump has said, he's trying to get a pack going to get Thomas Massey, out of his
Yeah.
position. Then we've got ICE going against court orders. It just seems like there's a lot going on, and it's difficult to kind of, in my opinion, tie it all to a point to see whether or not this has been done before, whether this is new history, or whether how much we should be concerned about this. So, Michael, I just wanted to ask you your personal opinion. Do you think this should be something that's going to be a great concern going forward, or do you think that this is something that will blow over, once the Trump administration passes? This kind of illegal deporting or illegal use of executive power on this scale.
So I definitely think it's going to be an issue down the road. I don't see this. I mean, obviously, because we don't. I'd say this because the state of the Democratic Party is in chaos. So
Turmoil.
with obviously the Republicans, I think I read something that Trump has 1.4 billion. Would it be
I saw a report of that, but I didn't read the detail.
Yeah, I want to get the details on that, but $1.4 billion for
Jay,
funding in
pull
the
it up.
midterms. Um, and Democrats are sitting at about, I think, 17 million with an M, million, by the way.
How much?
So we are not
1.4 billion to how much did the Democrats have?
17 million.
Wow.
So we are not,
Wow.
so Democrats aren't pulling in the funds and aren't pulling in the people. And as I was telling you, the DNC aren't able to pay their bills. So at the moment right now, the Democratic Party is in chaos, is in damage control, beyond damage control at this point.
Yeah, you're right. But Trump boasts record 1.4 billion in fundraising.
And I start off with saying that because that if we weren't in such a bad light, the concern wouldn't be that bad because we could put up a good candidate with a good base behind it for the next upcoming election, as well as the midterms. And with saying that if a Republican was get in office in 2028, these concerns would expand over the next 4 years. Trump would want that individual to continue down this pipe because if another Republican is put into that office, they are going to most likely have to be a MAGA Republican. I saw JD Vance's polling at 28% above most candidates so far.
I definitely think he'll be the Republican candidate.
Which is fair. I could see him being the Republican candidate. But I know off screen we were saying we don't see him being as charismatic enough, but that does not stop him from having Trump as his vice president, as they have floated around the Steve Bannons of the world and the Charlie Kirks of the world.
I agree. Yeah.
But that's where the real concern lies. It's if, the Democrats don't have their party together, we fail in the midterms and we fail at the presidential election in 28. This will be the norm of the Supreme Court, of policies and of the executive branch and how they curtail power from the other branches.
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to be something that this is only just these 4 years and that's it. That would only be the case if Democrats can win in the midterms, put the seats on their majority and not on the Republicans' majority.
Yeah.
And put up an actual good, moderately progressive candidate that can, beat out the MAGA Trump. And that's where it's going to be. And then it's also with the MAGA Trump camp as well. Will it die after he's done? Or will it continue through JD Vance in a new light? Like, will JD Vance be a more calmer, calculated,
MAGA light?
less exactly? Will he be, little small m MAGA is what we'll call it.
Small M.
Small M MAGA, because they little D Democrat, little R
No,
Republican.
make America good again, not make America great again.
Yeah, I think he has some leaning that he could do. He spoke. I'm pretty sure he spoke out um regarding the Iran situation. It was almost unsecretive to an extent. I have to look that back up, but I do believe he did speak out about the Iran situation, almost speaking not on the same page as Trump.
Trump, yeah.
But yeah, I don't see this issue going away, especially with our justices as well getting older. I do see a retirement coming within the next 2 years. Um, I mean, electoral. Well, we'll get to the electoral politics later on, so I can touch on how that landscape could possibly look down the road. But yeah, these Supreme Court cases should be nothing that we should be afraid of seeing the next 2 years because they're going to be coming down the pipe, and they are only just really getting started because they've had many numerous wins.
Yeah.
And the next one that I want to speak about is the Maryland Supreme Court case, Mahmoud versus Taylor. This has also happened yesterday as well. So it's relevant due to the Maryland connection. Muhammad, you live in Baltimore, so that's that connection. We want to make sure to keep within those three.
It's also an interesting thing to just talk about on a national basis. It is a Supreme Court decision.
It's in I would say in New Jersey when I've attended committee meetings, especially on the higher education and education, the issue has been brought up with books actually having explicit, um, I would say, pornographic images and or language within the books that they're giving to elementary school and high school kids. It was very graphic, so I'm not going to repeat
Yeah.
a lot of the things that I heard, but one line I would say was it was something about Jimmy asking uh Johnny how he likes oral sex, basically. Something along that line.
No, not something.
Yeah, not something that should be in school. So it's a segue in from that. So the Supreme Court ruled in a 6-3 ruling yesterday on Mahmoud v. Taylor, siding with a group of Maryland parents in Montgomery County who challenged the school district's policy of denying opt-outs from lessons featuring books on gender identity, sexual orientation, and other LGBTQ themes. The decision overturned the lower court's ruling affirming parents' rights to exempt their elementary school children from such instruction when it conflicts with their religious or personal beliefs. Now, Muhammad, I know you are Muslim in belief. How does that resonate with you? This ruling, and if your kids were in a school like that, what would you do as an action? Do you agree with these parents?
Uh,
Do you think it's a overstep of their decision by the Supreme Court, or do you think that this decision is fair?
I'll say this from a cultural, like Muslim cultural side. I'm American primarily. I like to say like ethnically I'm American, Bosnian, religiously Muslim. But from this cultural perspective, I will say that I agree with it. I don't think that we should expose our kids to something that they're too small to understand. And I think that there are people, some of the people who are open to the idea of exposing this to kids at a younger age are also people who of the mind know that children can also be very susceptible to influence by other people. Just as we all know, children don't know they're children. You know what I mean? And I think that we shouldn't expose them to things that are much more nuanced. We're not teaching these kids political philosophy at the age of 12 years old either. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
it just if we even exclude the sinful nature of it and like in my opinion, I will say degenerative nature of it, because personally me, I'm of the mind that that sexual life, that's something that's very personal and romantic between a man and a woman. And I think that exposing it to kids is bad because they don't need to know that. They'll explore as they get older, as they fall in love and things like more of that, like we're all naturally supposed to do. But aside from that, I will like to add that from a political perspective, I agree with it because think about the fact of the Supreme Court saying, yes, Even if you as a parent don't agree with what the school's teaching your kids, you have to let the school teach your kids this. And that
Yep.
brings in the realm of, well, what if the government wants to teach my kids something that is, political extremism? What if these people start teaching my kids, like this could take a very easy toll down a dark road of, it's an extreme example. Let's look at Nazi Germany. These kids were, being brainwashed in public
Yeah.
in public government schools. They were taught to hate certain things. They were taught that they were supposed to be patriotic, very specific form of patriotism. And if they didn't agree with it, they were bad. So I agree with the idea that we shouldn't be forcing kids. We shouldn't force parents and their kids to be in lessons, school lessons they don't agree with. It's a free country. You know what I mean? On the basis of that, like if you think the school should be forcing these kids to learn certain things, what else do you think the government should be forcing people to do? And the idea of the government forcing anyone to do anything is a very scary thing that we can't do anything about. I know in America we've had only a few, exposures to that where, the government does something so tremendously bad to the citizens but gets away with it. One of the best examples, actually, I'm blanking on the specific name, but back during the World War II Vietnam time, the US government sprayed biological chemicals all over San Francisco, and hundreds of people got killed by the sickness they got from the biological chemicals. The reason why the US did this was so they could test out how much the public would be exposed and weak to chemical warfare if somebody, let's say from China, were to attack us. So they literally did chemical warfare against its own citizens to test out how well they could respond to chemical warfare if attacked by an enemy. No one got in trouble for it. And no one. And this is just an example of how the more federal power, the stronger the federal government is, the easier it is for them to enact these evil things that maybe you think it's a good thing. Maybe someone else thinks it's evil. But the point being, even if you think this certain thing is good for them to do, the more power you give them, the more they're going to expand that reach until everything's within their grasp and you can't do anything without the government involvement, and you can't do anything about the government involvement, which is the scariest part. Very Star Wars Empire like, in my opinion. The idea of just
You guys.
expanding that.
Yeah.
So what do you think,
Yeah.
Michael? Do you agree with the Supreme Court's decision on this?
So, I mean, I don't necessarily. It's tough one. I do agree that these you should be able to take your children out of school if you don't agree with what's being taught. I completely and fully agree with that. And I think that's really just the boil point down to it. Like, realistically, you should have the right to pull your children out of school if you don't want to have them learn these things. And
Absolutely.
this is being and I understand the inclusivity and the diverse, want to be diverse. And I understand that and wanting to, have different forms of education. But we're talking about school children. This like brings you back to the John Locke's blank slate theory in the mind. So like when kids, they're individuals born, they have a blank slate, everything they take into their first few years, that's how, they come out about. Children should not have to learn about LGBTQ themes when they're in elementary school or even in middle school. That's something that can be touched upon in high school or even in college. Within those years, those are what you need to learn your interests, what you're good at athletically, what are your hobbies, who are your friends, what you want to do with your life as you plan it out as being a kid, being an astronaut, president, those high big dreams. You keep those things there.
I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this, Michael. When growing up, coming out of high school, graduating, so many people had no clue what they want to do. So many
Yeah.
people go to college and they're like, I don't even know why I'm here. I get into college because that's what everyone's doing because that's what I'm told to do. But I don't know what I want to do. I'd say more than half the people I graduated high school with had like that kind of mentality of I don't know what to do next.
Yeah, and I think, like, just you should be able to opt out. I mean, you should not have the ability to, not want your kid to have a certain level of instruction if it's from these themes. Like, I think that's completely fair. And that's where, like we were saying earlier, we like homeschooling is now becoming almost the new norm. And actually, there's been a few bills introduced in New Jersey, which I'm kind of raising my eyebrow about. They're wanting to basically checking curriculums of homeschools, like parents that are homeschooling, checking in with the parents that are homeschooling. Yeah, it's about like 3 or 4 bills that are covering homeschooling, which is very interesting. But yeah, I don't.
Very controlling.
I think the Supreme Court honestly got it right with this one.
Yeah.
I think LGBTQ themes should only be covered in high school and college level, because at the high school level, that's when you get, the 1960s and, civil rights era. You can throw that stuff in there, themes of why it's important, but not like themes as to, something that the kids should be interested in and leaning towards. That's up to the kids to decide. The information that the teacher should be giving them is basic knowledge information on past events.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be about, various different hormones or like, different procedures or things of that nature. It should just be on the history and the facts and the policies that the LGBTQ community has done, because that's more powerful than only speaking about the procedures and the issues that they go through. It's better to speak about the triumphs than, the tribulations that these people go through. Same thing with I think was it in Trump's first term, the critical race theory. It's the same premise, different argument, obviously, because one is on, race and a higher level of race, but the same consensus, they both should be taught not at the middle school, elementary school, K through 12. I mean, K through middle school level. It should be at the high school and at the college level, which I think most people can agree with. These are, very high sensitive topics that can, turn a child's mind to where the parents are not and could not be in agreement of it.
I also
And
think
ultimately,
go ahead, sorry.
as ultimately it's the parents who, that child is going to learn their behaviors from when they're homeschooled, when they're at the school, they're going to learn that from the teacher. So the teacher is pushing these ideas and the parents have no clue. I mean, you feel like as a parent, you're losing your child almost to the education system.
Yeah. I mean, I wanna add something else further to that is that, just in general, things that are theoretical in nature, when you're even high school age, it's difficult to quite literally understand things that are abstract in nature. I mean, think about anything that's philosophical, mentality. Our brains literally don't finish developing until we're in around our lower to mid 20s. And even through the last development of our brains, last stage of our brain development, that's where we learn about abstract thinking and hypothetical thinking, like, the what if scenarios based off of historical and critical thinking, or the scenarios of like, it brings in a lot of nature, like the whole, you make fun, a lot of people make fun of it when we're younger, but the idea of like, I think, therefore I am. You know what I mean? When you, I know many people who like would throw these things around like jokes because yeah, of course, I think therefore I am. What does that even mean? Of course. But then as you get older, you begin to understand the theoretical nature of these things, like are tied to the LGBT lessons. There is no concrete reasoning why some people are gay or aren't, or the default is straight. Male with woman. But there is no gene that makes somebody gay. There is no like blank snap thing that we've realized that makes people LGBT. There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of contributing things. It's a very theoretical thing. There is no concrete reason, therefore it's theoretical. And I think that when you start throwing around these things that you teach them in books, especially to kids, when kids read books, they think about these things like they're concrete in nature. You know what I mean? If I'm reading, of course, as a kid, I read Harry Potter. I know this is fiction. This is Harry Potter. But if you were to give me a book that was, talking about, even in a childish way, like this is how things are in real life, I would literally think that's how things are in real life. If you show me a book about, I actually have a good example about this. When I was younger, I read a lot of Magic Treehouse books. And I remember some of them were about historical details. And I'd read them and think, oh, some of them are about the Civil War and things like that. And I think that, wow, this must have actually, I didn't think this is exactly how the Civil War was. Of course, it's the Magic Treehouse books. But I thought, these details sound pretty reasonable for what's going on. And as we've mentioned earlier in the conversation, children are very susceptible. They're children. You know what I mean? They're learning. They take in, like, their brains are sponges. They take in everything that's surrounding them, all the information that's going around them. So I also agree with the Supreme Court on this. I think that things that are theoretical in nature, not just LGBT theory, but also political theory, religious theory, and so on and so forth, should be reserved for college and higher education or higher, because when you're even in high school and younger is all about figuring out what you want to do and who you are as an individual, what you're interested in. and then you specialize with that in higher education. You know, I mean, if you come to the realization that you are interested in, learning more about LGBT, you can take the classes in higher education. It's all up to you. But the government should not be forcing a curriculum into people's minds that is against, not even against, that is theoretical in nature. We can't apply and push things that are theoretical as fact, because that's just going to result in issues, especially when that conflicts with so many people's cultural values.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think the Supreme Court, without a doubt, got it right, and we'll continue to watch any cases that derive from this, as well as derived from the other cases that we talked upon as well.
Is
So we're
there
gonna wrap up. Mhm.
I was gonna say, is there any more upcoming Supreme Court decisions? I've been in the loop with these two, but I haven't been following along if there's been anything else that's been in the process.
I do know, I believe next month or before the end of this month, there's possibly a few more that they're gonna take up. So I'm gonna keep my eye out, and hopefully on the next episode, we'll be able to touch on those other rulings as they roll out. And this is gonna be some important stuff coming down the pipe with the Supreme Court, and whether it's an expansion or a retraction of executive powers or state powers, we will keep everyone posted in the next episode.
So,
So to wrap that up,
yeah,
let's
go
move
ahead.
on to we're gonna move on to, I believe we're touching on the air next.
Oh yeah, that War and Peace. Yeah, we're at already War and Peace in the Middle East. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about these two. Believe it or not, guess how long we've already been talking?
I know long.
35 minutes. Yeah, you're worried. You're like, yeah, this will be like 30 minutes to an hour. If one topic that took us 35 minutes.
Yeah.
So we won't do two. We won't go for like a whole hour on these next two. We'll maintain it. But War, Peace in the Middle East. I think this is an interesting topic. I wanna hear your thoughts first on this, Michael. Tell us what has happened in the last few weeks with Iran, Israel, and America, and exactly what do you think's gonna happen? What do you think is the how everything's going about everything that's going on?
So I know most recently it's definitely the ceasefire
Yeah,
has been made.
the Trump
And
F
actually,
bomb, the ultimate bomb.
yeah, the ultimate bomb. And I have seen that Trump is open actually to bomb Iran again.
Yeah.
I think this is a campaign that we should not be involved in. We're being dragged into by Israel. Israel wants to have a fight with Iran that's on their terms. That doesn't have to be on our terms. I think we are too beholden upon Israel and their foreign policy. Um, as I was saying to you earlier, and how the timeline works is, 2015, the Iran deal was brokered by President Obama, and then 3 years later, when President Trump got in office, he got the U.S. out of the deal.
Now it
And then now we see in
I want to get some background history before you dive more into the modern time, and I want to give a little bit of intro,
yeah, go ahead.
information on the U.S.'s general history with Iran and its nuclear program. So in 1957, this is actually when U.S. began Iranian nuclear cooperations partnership. It was Ike Eisenhower. I like Ike. Such a good way to say it. He began an Atoms for Peace program, where the U.S. provided a 5 megawatt thermal reactor to the Tehran research facility, which kicked off Iran's nuclear program. Later on, the Shah, which has helped with U.S. to get into power, planned to build more than 20 nuclear power reactors. So then the 70s is when the first actual discussions about the real nuclear reactors came to play, because the megawatt thermal reactor wasn't nuclear. So the U.S. wanted safeguards beyond the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, and the Shah pushed hard for the full development of the full nuclear cycle. But the U.S. was a bit hesitant to go along with that, because they thought if the Iran had full control over being able to go from processing it to refining it to using it, that they would be able to go further out of people's control to be able to make their own weapons, even if they agreed to say they won't. So then in 1979, post the revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini opposed the nuclear development for theological reasons. And so for people who don't know, Iran is mainly Shia Muslims. That actually makes about 20% of the Muslim population. They have in Iran is the predominant foothold of Shia Muslim Islam. Now that's split between Sunni and Shia and other schools of thought. Well, Sunni and Shia is as much of a split in Islam as there is, honestly. but it really just comes down to which group believed should succeed the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Sunni thought it was Ali Bakr, which was the Prophet's right hand man, essentially, whereas the Shia thought it should be the Prophet's son, and then that's what the split is for. Now, there is a few theological disagreements, but there is theological disagreements across Islam as a whole, and that's what the schools of thought are. So back to the point, Iran is mainly Shia, and the Ayatollah at the time said, for Islamic reasons, I'm against nuclear energy, which I don't understand. Quite literally, nothing says nothing against in the Quran against nuclear energy. Then we're using science to progress mankind. So then, following his death in '89, then the new Ayatollah, which is also named Ayatollah Khomeini but spelled differently, expanded Iran's undeclared nuclear activities. And then years later, in 2012, the Defensive National Institute, James Clapper, who the head of the DNI right now, Tulsi Gabbard, he said in testimony, said Iran is capable of making nuclear weapons, and he said this because they have made progress in uranium enrichment, nuclear reactors, and ballistic missiles. So this is some very important terminology, in my opinion. He says from what it could draw if it wanted to build missile deliverable nuclear weapons. So basically, he's just saying they've built everything needed to build the missiles, but we don't have proof they're actually building the missiles. You know what I mean? And then that was the big concern the whole time with all this is Iran going to the threshold of uranium enrichment for nuclear weapons, or are they just going beyond to the point of energy? Because 3.5% is the amount of uranium enrichment you need for energy, for nuclear reactors. Around 70 to 80% is what you need for weapons. So then in 2015, as you mentioned, we get the nuclear deal, and now let's get back to the modern time. Michael, take it away with what's been going on in the recent time.
So yes, so it was signed 2015. Trump got out of it in 2018, and that's when Iran began to higher their enrichment levels, actually past that 3.5% that you mentioned, and that provided a existential threat to Israel. Is what they felt like. So that's when in 2015, the offensive was launched against Iran, given that they were on the verge of having nuclear weapons. Now, what's funny is that this is very much paralleling to the Iraq situation where they had
Mass destruction.
mass destructions, yes, WMDs, as they call it. So I say it's the same playbook because I believe in March, as you mentioned, Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI secretary, stated actually that Iran would not be months away from a bomb, actually years. Weeks following after that, Trump actually denounced those findings from his own DNI secretary. Now that's appalling because if you remember, that's that same parallel when we were saying they have weapons of mass destruction, but there's actually no evidence of that. And that's kind of the case here. We're saying our intelligence is saying that, they're years away, from a nuclear bomb, where Israel is like they're weeks and months away from getting a nuclear bomb. And it seems like the administration is lending their ear more to the Israeli regime than, our own intelligence. And that's how we're kind of entrenched in this battle or war now, even though there is a ceasefire that, is very temporary as it is. We could see some peace possibly being made, but with Trump, saying that he's open to bombing Israel again, bombing Iran again. And as well as that Iran's nuclear facility was not bombed, it was not destroyed, basically, is another instance to where I can see Iran, getting a little bit more exuberant with their enrichment of their uranium, and there could be real issues down the line. But are they months or weeks or years away? There's too much out there to really pinpoint and accurately say, because you have our intelligence saying one thing and Israel intelligence saying another, and Trump siding with that, Israeli intelligence. So I think as it goes out and continues, hopefully there is peace in the Middle East. But now we know that Israel is changing their changing their horns to Gaza now. So that will be the new issue not the new issue, but the recurring issue that will come up in the next few weeks as well. We will see what they will continue to do in Gaza. And I know Trump had said to Benjamin Netanyahu that he wanted the Gaza war done within 2 weeks. So we will see if that's actually going to be the case.
It's not going to be.
No, it's
Then
not at all.
it's not going to be. There is no war in Gaza. It's a massacre. Yeah, there's no other way of calling it. It's so one-sided. You can't, it's like Israel has killed more children than Hamas has killed man, woman, and children combined.
Yeah, it's a very devastating situation that's going on there that continues to go on there.
Yeah.
And it's disheartening to know that, the United States is funding and backing those efforts. I think yesterday I actually saw Marjorie Taylor Greene stating that, US senators and representatives have to pledge fealty and loyalty to Israel when, they first get into office. And I think that that's what's outrageous in a sense, but not outrageous when you think about it, because the AIPAC, which is the Israeli lobbying pack, is the largest lobbying pack within the nation, actually, and they are not actually registered as a foreign agent, which other groups, if they did have, foreign individuals lobbying the American government, would be labeled as that. So it's interesting to see the differences, how we look at Israel to other countries when lobbying our members of Congress, where we just give Israel kind of a free reign, free pass
Yeah.
on, whoever they want to lobby and whatever they want to do, give for these members of Congress.
And to add another thing about Israel having a free pass, since we're on the topic of Iran, Israel, and nuclear history, Iran signed the NPT since the late 70s, early 80s, and has abided by it until the 2010s, and then they re-signed under it 2000, and they re-signed the new Iran deal under Obama, and then that got repealed under Trump, and now where they are. So basically, most of Iran's nuclear history, they've been abiding by international requirements. Israel, on the other hand, is one of 5 countries to not sign the NPT. It's also one of the few countries to not sign the NPT that has nuclear weapons.
I
So
think they keep it hidden from us too in certain aspects.
they
I think
have
we do
never
checks or do
they've never
something with theirs.
approved nor denied of the existence of nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
But it's clear that they have it based off their uranium history.
And
Then
looking at like Iran's thought process when you think about it, if you look at all the campaigns from the Obama time period that were launched, it was all on countries that did not have nuclear weapons. So in Iran's justification, you got to look at the history. If you don't have a nuclear weapon,
there's no better
you're,
defense
you're
right
gonna
now than having
you're gonna try to get taken over,
why
or
like
there's gonna be war brought to your shores
I mean
by someone.
think about it this way, we found Osama bin Laden in Pakistan and we invaded in the secret of night and left as soon as we could. If that was in Iraq, we would have started a whole dang war over it like we did. The reason why we didn't with Pakistan is because they actually have nukes. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
Iraq, if Iraq actually had weapons of, that's all the proof you need. If Iraq actually had WMDs, we never would have invaded because the threat of them using it against us would have been instant. You know what I mean?
yeah.
That's why they're almost have them. That's why I need to stop them, which is this, as you said, the same playbook we're seeing now with Israel and Iran. And I think it's interesting to note, however, I think that not even I think, but it's shown by recent polling that the support for Israel on the American level has been plummeting, and to the point that
Oh yeah,
for the first time in American history, the average American dislikes Israel, whereas before it's always been they approve or approve of Israel or even like Israel. And it's interesting to see because it's for 2 totally different reasons. You have people on the left who are sick of the inhumane treatment that Israel is clearly enacting on the people of Gaza and the West Bank. And then you have people on the right who are sick and fed up with how much influence Israel has, a foreign nation, on our country. They see people like Ted Cruz going on there saying, on Tucker Carlson's
yeah. That
podcast,
was
he's like,
that was a mess.
I'm duty bound by the Bible to support the people of Israel. And Tucker
Yeah,
rightfully asked him, where's that in the Bible? You're talking about the Bible. Have you read it? Where is it in the Bible? He's like, I'm not sure. I don't know. How don't you
yeah. I
know?
think
You can't
Texas
use
is a
the
good
Bible
tell.
as
No.
justification if you don't know if what you're actually referring to. Now, this is just, I won't go on too long about this, but this is more of like a personal issue of just religion as a whole. Is people who, use the faith as justification for their actions when they don't actually know the faith. And it seems like there's so many people who in America, I know a lot of people on the, a lot of strong Christians who are becoming very not anti-Israel, but much more on the side of why do they have the influence that they have on the American country? You know what I mean? Like I do not want, I'm not voting for these politicians for them to then bend over backwards to these people who,
Yes.
fun fact, Israel has killed more Christians than Hamas, the terrorist Muslim
Wow.
group. So yeah, that's I plan on going. I plan on protesting that, like just getting a sign and walking around with that, because I found that outstandingly insane. The fact that Israel, the country that so many Christians are working to support, a lot of Baptists, and they have killed more Christians than a Muslim terrorist group. That's not something that you'd easily see on the national headlines. You know what I mean? Not something you would ever see on the national headlines. But I think that how this ties into Israel-U.S. Relations and the overall situation in Iran is I don't think Israel wants peace, and I think a big part of that is due to Netanyahu. I don't think the average Israeli is like a blood-hungry beast, but I do think that when you have a prime minister who is very militant and very set on having an image set up, we all know the amount of propaganda Netanyahu puts out, going back 20 plus years of Iran being close to nuclear weapons to the claim pushing on to Iran that the Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. And we go even further from there, the attack on USS Liberty. It literally goes further and further. The amount of Israel being a detriment to American politics and the American way of life is that people are realizing and they're fed up with it. And I think that honestly, sooner rather than later, I think the next 20 years, which in the grand scheme of time is sooner rather than later, I think the American support for Israel is going to completely dry out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There'll be a generation of American voters that do not agree with Israel and vast majority, without a doubt. That's definitely I can definitely see that being the case. And yeah, I wouldn't highly doubt it. I think the Israeli support is dwindling and dwindling fast as we see the acts that they do, the policies that they make, and how they drag us into almost every conflict that they are involved in.
Now,
And do you have mhm.
go ahead. What were you about to ask? I was going to bring up the specific data polling on the American support for Israel based off of age, which I think is the interesting part, which really shows the difference.
Yeah, let's cover that age section, and then we can, jump into some what's next, the economy after that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
jump into the economy.
yeah. So to finish off with this Israel-Iran bit, I also personally do think that Iran does have clear reasoning for wanting nuclear weapons, because like the same thing that Israel's saying, Iran is at not, I don't know if I'd even argue active existential threat, because that's tough to say. I mean, it's not like Israel's actively trying to nuke the Iranian population. But if Israel's justification is these people don't like us, they're going to have nukes soon, that's a threat. Iran quite literally has that exact same possible logic of Israel doesn't like us and they actually do have nukes. We want to defend ourselves. But I think that a lot of people are seeing the hypocrisy behind Israel and its ways, and this is fascinating to me, Michael. If you can hear me, let me know, because I want to get your reaction to this. All right. So this is the before and after support. So this is from 2022, after the October 10th attack, to current day, 2025 April. So among Republicans aged 18 to 49, basically every Republican under the age of 50, the support for Israel was at 65% supported Israel. And that 2.5 years is gone down to 50. So 15% loss in support in 2.5 years among Republicans under 50. So this is the kicker. This is really where I think that 20-year timetable kicks in. The only group that majority supports Israel is the Republicans above the age of 50. Republicans above the age of 50 had a 81% support for Israel before at October 10th. And then as of April 2025, they have a 77% support. So only a 4% change, unlike the young Republicans who rightfully notice what Israel is doing to the American government and the people. Now, the Democrats, this is an interesting one. So Republicans as a whole went from 77% support to 63% support, 73 to 63. Now Democrats, so as a whole, they went from 47% support Israel to only 31% support Israel. So 69% of Democrats unfavorably view Israel. They which is funny to think about when nearly 3/4 of your voter base dislikes Israel, but you continue to back them up in the Israel massacre of Gaza. No wonder you're going to lose the election.
Yeah.
No wonder, dude. So I want to touch base on this, Will, when we finish this data. So then, but specifically among the Democrats under 50. So back after October 10th, Israel only had 38% support of Democrats under 50. So that's already less than Republicans after. But as of April 2025, they've only got 29% support. And then for the older Democrats, this one's the biggest jump, a 23% jump. After October 10th, 57% of older Democrats support Israel. As of this year, it's only 34%. So literally 23% change in support among the older Democrats. The only reason why the country as a whole supports Israel on a governmental basis is because of those older folk. But what I think is interesting is there's two things that the Democratic base agrees on majority right now. That's healthcare for all, which is expansion of Medicare. I'm sorry, is supported by 81% of Americans. That literally means more than 3/4 of the country. That includes majority of Republicans, majority of Democrats, all support this idea. When's the last time the Democrats were actually talking, and pushing the idea of Medicare for all or healthcare for all? Since Obama, they stopped. They gave up.
Yeah. Well, they started with Obama, then Bernie Sanders, but he got snubbed in 2016
by Hillary Clinton and the
Yes,
DNC.
DNC said that was their fault, and that's how we end up with Trump.
That's how we end up with Trump right here when you push a war criminal. Democrats got what they wanted. As we can see here, I think this is so much proof of just visible evidence of what's wrong with the DNC and the Democrats nowadays. Two things that the majority of the country even and the most of your voter base agrees on, and you're pushing the opposite of that. Your voter base unanimously agrees on we don't like what Israel is doing or support them, but you continue to send them billions. Majority of the voter base says we want better Medicare for all, we want better coverage, health coverage. They say, all right, well, we're not even going to talk about it. You know what I mean? Like that's a radical idea that we don't even need to talk about. Ridiculous. No wonder.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and it's policies. I mean, not policies, issues like that the Democrats need to focus on in a way. There's a lot of things that Democrats need to focus on within these next coming years and elections, and that is a great segue for us to continue this conversation and to now move to the electoral landscape. I mean, no, I'm sorry, we're going to
economy,
next, right?
and then
we'll go ahead and
electoral
electoral.
yeah.
Yes, economy next. The big numbers and the big money. What's all going on? So, Muhammad, what do you have on the economy for us today?
Oh man, there's a lot going on. So for those of you who aren't in the know, the S&P as of June 28th has just broken its all-time high. This is very big news because generally when a stock or just in general an asset is reaching its all-time high, that's really a make it or break it point, because if it fails to break it, then it's seen as not enough people are interested in this to the point where they were before. There's clearly a change in the market. If it pushes beyond it, then it shows clearly people are more interested in this now than they were before. So it shows two things: the sign of the market's mental health, as a funny way of saying it, and also just the actual health behind the physical health behind the market, the economy, the actual things propping up the market itself. So it's interesting to say for many people who might not be in the markets. The markets are very irrational. There's a famous Warren Buffett quote that I really like: "The market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent." We'll see stocks that aren't making money go up 5x in 2 years compared to stocks who are making money who only go up 20% in 1 year. And that's quite literally the reason why. There's a lot of mental state behind it. So when you see the entire market go past its all-time high, that's a sign of, generally of good health. So what is pushing this all-time high? And the big thing is, Michael, is the China trade deal. Now, Trump very cleverly announced this on Thursday near the weekend close of the market. which helped it get over that little last push it needed. But what is basically happening with China and the USA is that, for those of you who don't know, China has a complete monopoly on the rare earth minerals of the world. Now, rare earth minerals are not minerals that are very scarce amongst the globe, but they're minerals that generally, when you find them in ore deposits, there's only trace amounts of them in ore deposits because they share that with other rare earth minerals or metals. So if you're pulling these out from the ore, you're only getting trace amounts, so you need to do a lot of, excavating and processing to be able to get enough rare earth minerals to actually make them useful. And what do they use these minerals for? A lot. Magnets, weapons. So many bits of our military assets are relying on these rare earth metals. So that's the big thing. According to China and USA, the latest progress is encouraging, but according to China's senior advisor, it's important to temper expectations because there's a lack of details on which rare earth export curbs will be relaxed other than magnets. Now, magnets are a big one that is used in many of our weapons, but it still leaves open a big issue of, will we be getting these? Because aside from weapons, this is also used in phones, technology. So much of our tech is related and requires these rare earth minerals. So, to give you an idea of how much of a monopoly China has on these, China handles 69% of the world's production, and then they handle 100% of the sheer processing of the heavy earth metals and 85% of the light rare earth minerals, because the few countries that actually mine rare earth minerals that aren't China, China is 69%. We at the US are 12%. We send our rare earth to China to process and refine because we don't do it here because it's too dirty for the environment, and it costs a lot to start that up. So we just give it to China, who takes on the environmental damage and takes the money and then processes it, refines it, and sends it back to us, which is interesting to think about. Think about that. We mine some rare earth minerals, send it to them, gets tariffed. You know what I mean? They refine it.
Yeah.
We get it back, gets tariffed again. You know what I mean? Then they make that rare earth mineral into a phone, which we then buy back on an extra tariff. So, the more you learn about how tied so much of our economy is into trade, especially with China, the more, my personal opinion on these trade agreements is that I think it's similar to the Iran situation, where Trump just wants to have a vocal victory. He made the trade deal with China that he then said was horrible, and then he shut it down so he could do this again. I don't think that there's much of a benefit to this, really, and I do not think that the impact of the tariffs has been really felt yet. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I happily be wrong, but I think that we really have yet to see the full impact, because he just keeps pulling them off and repealing them, putting them back on, repealing them. And I think until we have an actual consistent schedule, not even a schedule, but like a surefire thing of what we can expect, it'll be difficult for the market to continue to rally. Now, I think this news is what pushed the market to its all-time high, and now it was needed to push it forward because the market was struggling at that bit. So I think that this is more of the general economy being hopeful that these optimistic trade deals will continue. But if these things halt, which Trump has plenty of history of halting trade deals and more, I do think we're very likely to see a down draw in the economy, and likely not a massive one, you know what I mean? Because it's in Trump's interest to keep it propped up while the 2026 midterms are coming up.
Yeah, I would agree.
So it'll be interesting to see, because the main reason people voted for Trump over the Democrats was three reasons: the economy, the LGBT agenda pushed by the Democrats, and the illegal immigration stance. Those were like the three. I believe I saw a poll where it showed that amongst the issues where voters were plaguing, that was a 26, 25, and 24% swing over to the Republicans compared to the Democrats. So that means 65+% of the country agreed with the Republicans on those stances, which is quite literally the reason why. I know some Democrats like to point out, like some people on the left like to say, it's possibly other reasons why the Democrats lost. Democrats just didn't have a good platform. They did not have a good platform.
We weren't speaking on the issues on the kitchen table issues.
Yeah.
Things that really affecting local individuals. We were too focused on our, high prized voters. We had our blinders on and, didn't check with the local individuals, how they actually felt towards these candidates, towards Kamala and the party. So that was definitely the grassroots downfall, I would say,
I agree.
at the Democratic Party. And yes, definitely those three issues are the main reason that Trump got elected, with the main one being definitely immigration. I would
Oh yeah.
definitely think that it's definitely the main one, because that's what he's been um pushing for the most in his second term so far. So it's very interesting to see, and like as the economy changes throughout these next few weeks, I wonder how that well, next few weeks and months, I wonder how the sentiment will change with Republicans as their ideas towards the economy are. Like I imagine they are thinking it's doing better than under the Biden administration. I wonder what the comparative numbers look like actually.
Yeah. Stock market's higher. That's literally
Yeah,
most
so
just look off bat and what
yeah,
they
but
talk about.
we do all know stock market isn't a inherent indicator of
Nah,
people's pockets and how much they're getting in. So,
by no
well,
means.
another implication will be this big beautiful bill, as well as they call it. So he's going to
BBB.
have many implications for the economy, as well as electoral, which we'll hit on next, because that's going to be a big pill for Republicans to swallow when they go down to their districts and try to lobby this bill as a success, really.
Yeah. They I'm I'm pessimistic about the bill, and aside from the Medicaid cuts, my initial issue with the TCJA, which was Trump's tax bill that he passed back in 2016 when he first got elected, and this is an issue that I have with many political tax policies and just in general economic policies, that they're always temporary. I know Trump was heading touting the tax cuts to tips and tax cuts to overtime. Those only last until he's done with being president. So let's say the bill passes half a year from now. You know what I mean? Let's say 3 months from now passes at the just for simple math reasons. Let's say January 2026. So that'd be 2 years of that tax not being applicable, and then it'd be back to being applicable. And the kicker is, you think, well, is that how the whole bill is? No. Though the taxes that affect the working folk are temporary, the taxes that affect the corporate tax rate and more are permanent.
Permanent.
Permanent. When Trump cut the tax rate down for the corporate back in the TCJA, he cut it down to 21%, I believe, from I think it was 27%. That was permanent. The increase of the standard deduction was not. The other tax cuts were not. So it just, a lot of people have this complaint with the Republicans, which is something that I kind of agree with, but I don't see any better on the left, is the fact that they pander to the rich so much. It's what is it, capitalistic socialism? You know what I mean? Profits
Yeah.
for
How
us.
do you think he got the 1.4 billion?
Yeah, profits
It's
for
far
us,
so
but
far.
losses for you. You know what I mean? Yeah, like he's the party of the rich. The Democrats have lost the working class, and they've lost the wealthy base that's now we're supporting the RNC because it's working better for them.
Yeah.
And
No, I agree. I definitely full heartedly agree with that. Yeah. The Republicans have their ducks in order
yeah, they do.
compared to compared to the Democrats.
I mean,
Did you have
Go ahead, go ahead.
Mhm. No, I was gonna say, did you have any more on the economy, or do you want to
Yeah.
segue now into electoral talk?
Yeah, last thing about the economy, and then we'll segue into electoral politics, and that is going to be oil prices and with everything going on with Iran.
Yes.
So,
Gas and gas.
so the recent news coming out of the Middle East in regards to Iran and closing the Strait of, what was it, Hormuz? Hamas? No, it's I always blank on the
It's the Strait of
Hormuz.
something with an
Something with an H. Something with an H.
everyone do not butcher us for not knowing this name.
Strait of It is Hormuz. I always think it's Hormuz. I don't know how to say that's the issue. Hormuz. Hormuz.
Nice.
But so this 20% of the world's oil goes through the Strait of Hormuz, and it is primarily most of the oil that goes out of there goes to China specifically. So there's been talk about how self-detrimental that would be to the Iranian government if they were to implement the blockade on the strait. But Parliament for the Iranian people just voted to actually approve of the resolution to close the strait, but that decision comes down to the National Security Council of Iran, which
So
has
think I'm
agreed
not
to close it.
if I'm not mistaken, I believe that actually the hesitancy I think of Iran from closing that is I think it would greatly affect their partners, Russia.
Oh yeah,
And
oh yeah, and
I think
China.
Russia and China would be greatly affected by this closure. And those are their partners. Um, well, those that's who they see as their allies throughout this conflict, and then regional conflicts throughout history. They've been Russia and Iran, China have always been the big three within that region that we deem as our adversaries.
Oh
But
yeah.
no, yeah, definitely, yeah, I do believe that was the reason they don't want to hurt their own allies while trying to hurt the United States. And certainly that's a double-edged sword that I don't think anyone really wants to wield and or use at the time.
And it doesn't seem like
But
they're going to do it. I don't
yeah,
think
like
they will.
I think they approved it as like a scare tactic. Like, yes, we can do this, and yes, we are willing to approve a measure of this magnitude, but we are not willing to use it because of the regional partnerships that are there.
Yeah.
And just to only hurt America for this, I don't think they see it as being worth it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's definitely more self-detrimental than it would be to the cause of anti-Americanism.
And I will say I have seen the gas prices go up more and more and more. I think I would say on Monday, I'm located in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. So I would say last week before all this started to happen, gas prices might have been around like your key gas stations, you're sitting at like maybe like 280, 289, 290, maybe starting to edge on that 301. This past week, I have seen 321, 319, 318 around that range for gas. So it has gone up exponentially. And I also this could either be one or two things. It's either the actual output of the oil is lowering and they're hiring their prices, or this is just price gouging by the gas pump companies. It's either one of the two. And I do know Trump tweeted, keep gas low, keep gas low. Um, he's going to be looking out for anyone that's not keeping their prices low when it comes to gas. Because I do think that I think it's a little bit of both. It's a little both of the issues and concerns and hesitancy with what's going on in Iran, accompanied by companies taking advantage of that as well. Because we know that these gas prices are going up, and so do they, but we don't know how high they're going to go up, what's the formula they use for it to go up, and what information they have to make that analysis on why it should go up as well. So I think it's definitely those two pieces tied together that are really making the gas prices so exuberant now. I mean, I know before under Biden we were on that $4 range almost. So I mean,
It got
I
pretty
think
close. COVID was bad.
yeah, it got pretty close to that.
After
So
COVID was bad.
I think this is something to definitely keep a steady eye out when if our viewers are out there looking for certain news, definitely focus on Iran, oil, and what OPEC is doing as well. Those are three areas that will greatly affect your daily lives because everyone gets gas every day, so you want to make sure you're understanding what's going on.
So a little bit of technical perspective on this all from just looking at the price of things. That as of June 28th, so if the price of oil, this is an interesting thing. So I won't dive too much into the details of this. But the price of oil is at a point where if it closes the month below $67, we'll probably see it continue to go down. Now, one thing that but if it goes above 67 to close the month, we'll probably see it continue to go up. And one interesting thing that I find about, for those of you who might also follow charting, technical analysis, or also just follow assets in general, is that a lot of the time things align very interestingly well. Like, for example, Michael, the price for oil was when price consolidates, meaning it has less variation, like starts to tighten up. That's kind of indicating that something big is about to happen. And the oil price was consolidating ahead of the US strike on Iran. And just like looking from the outside in, if you didn't even know what US politics were going on, world politics, you could see that and think, well, it looks like something's about to happen with the price. And it's interesting how from now, just from an economic perspective, they got you can imagine the lower oil prices go, the cheaper gases, the higher oil prices go, the higher gas prices get. And MJ also mentioned countries price gauging on the oil they spend out, which is actually true. OPEC, for example, the oil what is it? The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. I was going to say the office. This is the organization made up of like Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, Iran, other petroleum producing countries, exporting countries, and they actually do have an arrangement set where they limit how much oil they produce and export, because then this will allow them to higher prices more. You know what I mean? Like the higher oil prices are, the better it is for these countries because they are exporting more, making more money off less oil. But Azerbaijan, on the other hand, went against what Saudi Arabia and other countries were trying to do, and they increased their oil output and they started exporting more because other countries are exporting less to try to price gauge oil. So they're like, well, if you guys are going to sell less to try to increase the prices, we're just going to sell more while you're all selling less, which is going to increase prices a bit. So we make the most money out of all this. And this really did bother Saudi Arabia and some of the other countries at OPEC, which I find hilarious. But it just goes to show, yeah, there is a lot of behind the table stuff of, people trying to pull the strings, manipulate the table so they can come out on top regarding this, a lot of stuff that goes behind world economics. And to tie this all now into what we're about to talk about, the election, the oil prices, many Americans care about gas prices. It's one of those things where you can literally just drive down the street, see it, and be like, damn, a year ago it was better. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where you can just really easily feel like life was better or life was worse before based off the gas prices.
Yeah, or even driving around and, near us, we have gas stations that closed when, COVID started. So I'm seeing like you know, the low prices back then, and I'm just like, wow, like mm, can't
So,
imagine, can't
so
imagine.
to give you a perspective on how much stuff dropped during COVID, it's insane. So COVID started in November of 19. So from November of 19 to the bottom of it was a holy shit 98% drop. At its bottom, one barrel of oil was worth 69 cents. Right now, one barrel of oil is $65. So nearly 100x less during pre-COVID because everyone was inside. No ships were cruising. Nobody was driving. It was crazy. But yeah, no, I fully agree with that. There was a gas station by me that closed during a little bit before the Great Recession, actually. And the prices for them, it was like $1.57 for a gallon.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God,
I'm like,
my 2000s was a great time to be alive.
great time to be alive. Yes, definitely. And that's gonna be a lot of talking points in the election coming up, especially in the good old Garden State of New Jersey. Here
Oh
in New
yeah,
Jersey,
so
we have. Well, before I start there, we're gonna go into our electoral section. So yeah, in New Jersey, we have a governor's race, and we have the Assembly and the Senate will be up for a vote, as will be up for election as well. I do not see the Assembly really changing its demographics as much, and should stay Democratic across the board.
yeah.
But for this governor's election, it's going to be very interesting. We now have, with the primary over, we now have Jack Ciattarelli and Mikey Sherrill for the respective Republican and Democratic nominations for the New Jersey governor. I was explaining to Muhammad earlier, Mikey Sherrill is a current congresswoman for New Jersey, and she's a former, I believe, former pilot, and I believe she was also one of the first groups of women to be able to fly pilots as well, or fly a certain aircraft, if I'm not mistaken. And then
Very
Jack
impressive.
Chiarelli, yeah, very impressive military background, fought for a very democratic issues. And then we have on the other side of the coin, Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican candidate, was a former state assemblyman, lifelong entrepreneur, had two businesses, had ended up selling to both. Is very business oriented. And, both of them, their main things just want to make Jersey more affordable. You have on the Chitterelli side, had that more Trump leaning, taking away, sanctuary cities, those statuses. And then you have on Mikey Sherrill's platform on that Democratic side, beefing up abortion rights, beefing up immigration rights, beefing up the sanctuary city rights for the state and the major cities that the state has as well. And so just looking back at that, data from the, primary election, Maggie Sherrill won with a 34% edging, Newark City Mayor, Mayor Ras Baraka, who only had 22%. And actually, funny enough, Mayor Ras Baraka is actually a friend of the family of mine. And then on the Republican side, look at this difference, it's, a little bit starker. Jack Chiarelli won 67%, torching John Brannick, who only had 15%.
Yeah.
And most
One-sided.
recently, yeah, very, very one-sided. And Jack Chiarelli they were all the Republicans were vying for Trump's nomination. Jack Chiarelli ended up getting the nomination. That definitely, propelled him forward when it came to New Jerseyans voting for him. And he actually did come very close, actually. The last governor election, beating Phil Murphy and unseating him. He came extremely, extremely close. I was not worried that he was not going to be the Republican nominee for the primary. And then just showing some internal GOP data as of June 16th, internal polling shows Mikey Sherrill at 45% and Chitterelli at 41%. 12% still undecided. So that 12% is going to be a very huge, swing in certain ways.
Especially with that
Though
4% difference.
Yes, yeah. I mean, Chitterelli is only down by 4%, but I think if he can, you know, turn his messaging into a more, a democratically business orientation, I think that can do well. Same thing with Mikey Sherrill. I think if she can keep her messaging towards, not just only standing against Trump, because that will get people out there, but that won't get independents out there. You have to say more than just saying I'm opposing
We're
Trump.
not
You have to
in,
give
yeah.
me, yeah, you have to give me policies, procedures that you're going to do that.
Clearly hasn't worked
Is
for the
going
Democrats already.
exactly that's actually going to protect certain services, make things cheaper, and hit those table talk issues that we were talking about earlier. And so the main three things that each of them are speaking upon, it's property taxes, housing, and education, which are the big three within within New Jersey. Definitely on the property tax side, because New Jersey's average property tax is about $9,000. Cheryl proposes, using a housing tax credit. Chiarelli wants a 10% flat tax reduction for that. And then looking at housing, the median home price in New Jersey is $550,000,
A
which
9,000
is
property tax on a 550,000 house isn't bad.
yeah, it's which is 30% above national average.
Yeah, I must here. I didn't know that. I was thinking about PAs when I was doing taxes. I'll oftenly see taxes higher than that. But go on. Sorry, I was just thinking, out loud here.
No, yeah, and then for education, making sure with support K through 12 funding and Chiarelli eyes school choice vouchers, and that education piece is kind of what I was saying earlier in the podcast. That you see how they're both focused on that K through 12 piece and not the higher education piece. I actually had a event that I went to last Tuesday, sponsored by NJBIA, New Jersey Business Industry Association, one of the leading lobbying firms for businesses in New Jersey. I had a chance to meet and speak with Mikey Sherrill and Jack Chitterelli. Funny enough, Jack Chitterelli he worked very closely with my uncle Kevin Jenkins
Yeah.
throughout his campaign. So we were
Respect.
talking on that, and then I was talking to him about his thoughts on county colleges and higher education system, and the workforce that New Jersey really needs to fill in these vacancies and get our industries, up to employment. Chiarelli said to me that he understands usage of county colleges and the critical key role that they play as economic engines within the counties and the states themselves, and that we need to empower our county colleges, whether it's with funding, expansion of credentials, and or student supports to be able to provide a associate level, a quality associate level education to individuals who understand that attending a four-year university is out of their financial reach, which in New Jersey is still only getting more and more with in-state tuition being exuberant compared to other states. That's why you have out migration levels that are so high in New Jersey. We send so many people outside of the state that don't come back. As I was saying, I'm a rare case, and there's many other rare cases just like that do go to school outside of their state, but then they do ultimately come back.
Yeah.
Now, still focusing on this, just this governor's race, and then I'll go to uh, the breakout story in New York. So in this race, giving my personal thoughts and processes on this, I think that it's going to be close. I think I personally do. uh, I do think that Shirley may pull this out,
Yeah.
given that when I was watching them both standing on, speaking, I got two different vibes from them. Shirley walked up, both of them professionally dressed. He just spoke from the cuff. He knew the issues. He was able to speak to them, answer the questions. Give actual data and commentary. Didn't seem he walked up with no papers, no nothing. Mikey Sherrill, on the other hand, walked up with a binder full of information, which I'm not saying it's bad to have that information, but that in my eyes was perceived as you have someone that is knowledgeable of it, has lived through it, has talked to the people that have lived through it. And then on which is Chiarelli's side, and then on Mikey Sherrill's side, you have someone that's, you know, polished data points, extensive, research, may not know, everything about it and be able to speak, openly about it without, no materials in front of themselves. But it's just that stark difference, really was making me lean more towards Chitterelli and how he was able to address the crowd and address issues off the cuff with no, writing materials or anything of that nature. That could be just due to, his prep work. So kudos to his team on that. But yeah, I think honestly a Republican governor could be what maybe New Jersey needs in a sense.
Yeah.
It could be, especially on education framework. It's a lot of oversight and accountability right now that the state.
There's a lot of lack of accountability across administrations, across education, higher education, across
Yeah,
the
I
country.
have Senator Cryan. He is the chairman of the Higher Education Committee on the Senate side, and we've worked with his office to um, put a package of bills to highlight our vision for higher education and community colleges. And he's focusing very much so on financial accountability and oversight of these institutions, because we actually had recently
That's good.
Jersey City University actually had to shutter its doors due to financial issues and the presidents and CFOs not being transparent about the financial issues that they had. Um, you know, Making programs for basically any major under the sun in liberal arts, and these majors weren't profitable for the students. They didn't, have jobs months afterwards
Yeah.
from graduating from these institutions. So this is kind of where on the education side of things that things are pulling towards in New Jersey. And I think that the two plans that the two individuals have will definitely shine some light and definitely make good progress for higher education in New Jersey. I think overall, though, in the state landscape, I do think that Chiarelli can be victorious. And as a Democrat who's always voted Democrat and supported Democrats, and I identify myself as a blue dog Democrat,
A
I think
blue dog.
Chiarelli, yeah, I think Chiarelli could be an actually a good candidate for New Jersey down the line.
Sounds like a Jersey man through and through from what you're saying.
Yeah, it's, breaking down the policies and, like, actually meeting with them and talking with them. changed my sights on him because before I didn't really know much about him when he ran the first time. But yeah, definitely has changed my sights on it. Not saying that I will vote Republican, but as I learn more about him and as the November election gets closer, that could be the case, but that will be delved into as these episodes keep going and as more
Yeah.
information comes out.
And I feel like to touch on what you said and to segue into our next topic on, the NYC mayor Shaka result of the primary, then I feel like, you mentioned yourself just now that, you weren't leaning towards, the what's his name again, the last name?
Jack Chitterelli.
Jack Chirway, so I'll just say Jack. So I'll just say Jack Chirway actually. So you mentioned that you weren't leaning towards Jack Chirway until you met him in person, got to talk with him, and then you started thinking, this guy seems like a good person to choose. And I think that one thing that is missing a lot in the modern political landscape that I feel like Trump did actually very well with his rallies when he first started running, and a few other candidates did very well with social media, like AOC when she first usurped the 11-time incumbent, and then the recent Mamdani winning the NYC mayor race, the primary over Cuomo, a very heavily traditionally backed Democrat. I think that a
Oh, wait.
big thing that people are looking for nowadays in candidates is that familiarity aspect, as well as the feeling of I know who this person kind of is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a sense of, I remember I saw this one picture of JFK. It was in an article that I was reading about, like how he was so charismatically good, and it was taught, and it was a picture of JFK in a suit, while being a presidential candidate, and it was him in West Virginia walking up to like a lone house, knocking on the door and shaking the person's hand. And it was just like the view was of this Washington D.C. suit wearing man coming down to shake hands and meet with these normal West Virginia people, and it was like the stark difference of a suit wearing man and the man in overalls and such. But it made you feel like he was this down to earth person who was just a normal dude. You know what I mean? Like he's just talking with these people, and a
Yeah,
lot.
that's definitely how I felt when speaking with Chitterelli. Definitely,
Yeah, like
definitely how I
this is
felt.
just a normal guy just trying to make some change, and it's so easy, especially nowadays. It's so easy to feel like the people that you see on TV and on social media, not they're not real people, but you don't have that sense of familiarity and that sense of humanity with them because
Yeah.
it's like it's a different world on the screen. You know what I mean? Like we're so used to seeing things on the screen that we never see in real life. Like, how many times have I, watched WWE as a kid and then I never saw Dwayne? How many times have I seen Dwayne The Rock Johnson, but not in person? And the thing is,
Yeah.
people know that on TV, on the screen, you're putting on an act for the most part. Maybe the person is legitimately being themselves, but when you're on the screen, it most of the time seems like you're putting on this look, because most of the time people are. So when you're releasing these bit more candid videos like what Mamdani was doing, he was releasing videos of him just on the subway talking to people
Yeah,
about
I've seen that. Yeah.
their issues,
Yeah.
and there's just videos like that where these people are just out in the community showing that they're out in the community, they're a normal community member. That plays a lot. And with Trump rallies, for example, this guy was going around. I remember, dude. There was a Trump rally. I lived in a small town in Pennsylvania, and there was a Trump rally 35 minutes away. And everybody in my town, 35 minutes away, it was like a huge thing, and it was almost people loved the notion of seeing this large political figure. And don't get me wrong, rallies are normal in the political landscape. But the thing
Yeah.
that I think that appealed Trump to so many people was it wasn't just a dude going up there to talk about what's wrong, what we can improve, what we can change, stuff like that. People felt like he was just a normal American. You know what I mean? A dude going up there just talking and having a good time. They felt like he was just another American instead of a person going up and putting on this act. That's why you see so many of Trump's supporters say he's an honest guy. And we know politicians lie. We know Trump's lied many a times, like every single politician does. But that's a common thing you hear about him. He's an honest person, or he's himself. That's a big one. Not even that he's honest. The guy's gonna be himself no matter what, and
Yeah.
people enjoy that about him.
They do.
And I think that sense of familiarity and the lack of the lack of an image that you're putting up an image that isn't you really helps. So let's segue that into the NYC primary race. You know, we saw Jack Chiarelli's effect on you. You know, I mean, you're you're a knowledgeable man who knows what he's talking about, and just that little bit of human psychology can really play a big part. And then we've got Mamdani here winning the NYC primary race. And you know, what are your thoughts on that, on like his campaign, and how this all turned out?
So, to start, I think it's a galvanizing moment. I think New York is going to be a how do I want to say this is going to be I think a framework for younger generations to how to get into politics. If I'm being honest.
Yeah, he's
30,
30. He's 32, isn't he?
I have an article up here. He's 33. I think
33,
he's a
that's young.
three term. 36. I'm sorry. No, wait, hold on. He represents Assembly District 36, but I think he is 33. If I'm not
Born
yeah,
in
he's 33 years old. Yep. So I think this is like a real huge framework for how younger individuals could get into politics. Because that's how I looked at it.
yeah.
I looked at it as, individuals challenging the incumbent, the establishment, AOC, Mandami, and they're winning. So that should hopefully spark interest. I mean, it sparks fire in me and hopefully in other individuals that want to get into the elected official realm, that it's possible for you to do these things.
I want to
And
ask
that
you a question after you're done with this statement, once you finish up this thought.
and I think it's also going to be a change possibly um, for a Democratic Party coming down the pipe, whether it's going to be because we've seen our progressive candidates, they're actually winning. They're not losing. They're actually winning. So establishment Democrats are going to see that as either is that a problem? Are we going too progressive outside of the moderate bandwidth that we thought that we had to stay in after the Trump election? Or is it or is it that we have to embrace these progressive, ideas, but have a more moderate spin to it? It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Especially it's interesting to see what Mayor Adams and Andrew Cuomo do as well. I've heard he may run as an independent, he may not, because
Yeah.
they may take away votes from each other, and that may put a Republican in office for the mayor's seat. We will see, but I do think this is a very changing moment. Having a Democratic Socialist be
Absolutely.
the selection
There's
ticket
no other way of
is
saying it.
is how it goes. Because I mean, I was always into politics and government, but really what got me fully invested into it is Bernie Sanders' campaign.
Yeah.
Just from the things that he was saying and his ideas and the reasoning that he had behind it and policies and how he was going to pay for it. He was someone that had, this is what we're doing. This is the reasoning for it. This is who it benefits, and this is how we're going to pay for it. I feel like I don't want to get too like the party shouldn't get too progressive to where we're putting out ideas on how to fund them is so exuberant that it actually hurts, the country and or the state as it is.
Yeah.
Um, and I personally think that Democrats would definitely need to stay more on a moderate track. I know this has worked in New York, but New York is a progressive state. I
Especially
don't know
I
if this will work in outside of
non-upstate New
New York.
York is very
Um,
progressive.
or even if this would work in New Jersey,
Yeah.
honestly. Like progressive policies are popular nationally, but within states and then counties, it may not be. Those are numbers that we don't have now, but from sentiments that probably you and I have heard or read, that seems to be the standard. That's at national level, we're here for it. At the state level, it's not as digestible. So it's really going to be walking a fine line as a progressive and or as moderate for Democrats in the next upcoming elections. But then also seeing as more elections come up, who are going to be who's going to have that nomination? Will it be the traditional Democrat, or will it be the Democratic Socialists? A few days ago, I did a poll on my Instagram, asking individuals to pick from four different camps. It was a Trump conservative, Bernie Democrat, traditional conservative, traditional Democrat. The camp that had the most results was the Bernie Democrat.
Yeah.
Was Bernie Sanders Democrat, which is once again interesting because a lot of individuals on social media are younger crowds and younger generations. So that poll, even though it was only a small subset of maybe like 17, 20 people, it still shows that most of them are leaning towards a Bernie Democrat outside of a Trump or a Trump conservative, traditional conservative, or a traditional Democrat, which
And
shows that Bernie's policies in 2016 resonated with a lot of individuals, as well as you see AOC and Mondami taking policies from that into their own platform. Not saying nothing's wrong with that. If something's good, you don't fix it.
yeah.
But it's a fine line that has to get walked to where you're not going too far left progressive or too, far right moderate to where you're losing people.
Damn, and I think the question I was going to ask Michael was, how much of this do you think is supporting progressive policy, or how much of this do you think is supporting a change in party makeup? Like, for example, AOC won over an 11-term incumbent, someone who was in politics for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
Mamdani beat Cuomo, the estranged former governor who was facing sexual harassment scandals and more, who has been in New York politics for also decade plus. Now, I agree that there's definitely some support for progressive policies, especially the ones that Bernie was fighting for. Now, I personally know people who were saying they were going to vote Bernie, and then when Hillary Clinton got the nomination, they voted Trump because they hated Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people like to default, a lot of the Democratic voters who like to default to the idea of, oh, they just didn't want a woman president. No, Hillary Clinton just wasn't a candidate who spoke to the people's problems like
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders did. There's a reason why Bernie Sanders has said that Democrats have abandoned the working class, because they have.
She
They
didn't want to earn the nomination. She thought she already won it just by being Hillary Clinton.
just by being Hillary Clinton, yeah. And I have my own reasons for being anti-Hillary Clinton, but I think at the end of the day is that was just an example of the DNC trying to do something against the party base, which clearly ended with Trump winning. And then 2020 comes around, they prop up Joe Biden. 2024 comes around, they prop up Biden for long enough until Kamala can get shoehorned in to be the candidate. No primary is done, despite her being the seventh most popular candidate the last time they actually had a primary. And they
Yeah.
shoehorn her in, and they were actually still somehow close. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. Like, they lost worse than the first year around when it was Clinton versus Trump. But
Yeah.
considering the fact that the Democrats had a horrible policy base, a horrible candidate,
Closet.
they somehow still came within a 5% range of 3% range of Trump's victory race. So I think that it is a mixture of two things. I think it's a mixture of wanting a new people in. I don't even mean like young people. I just mean people who haven't been the Democratic leadership for ages. And that's both on the statewide and federal side. But I do agree that there's definitely nationwide support for progressive policies. And I think two of the big ones that we see a lot are the increasing of the minimum wage and also Medicare for all. Both of those actually have majority support by both Republicans and Democrats. Florida, for example, has a $15 minimum wage. And a lot of people think, oh, well, they're a Republican
And New
state.
Jersey doesn't.
Yeah, and New Jersey doesn't. And a lot of people think, well, they're a Republican state. Why do they have increased minimum wage? And the issue isn't having an increased minimum wage. The issue is, should the federal government force states to have that increased minimum wage? But
Yes.
even on the federal basis, most voters agree that it should be, which I disagree with. I don't think the federal government should implement that. But if most voters are saying this, then run with that. You know what I mean? If most voters are saying we agree with this, then say, yeah, okay, well, we'll follow the base of what the people want. And that's what the Democrats have lost, in my opinion. The Republicans still have that support of the party of the people on the right side. You know what I mean? They view Trump as a populist, as a member of the people. No one thought Hillary Clinton was a member of the people. No one thought.
I also don't think that anyone was thinking then that the Democratic Party was the party of the people because we were the party of, I mean, I can be frank here, but of minority groups.
Yeah,
We weren't the
absolutely.
party of, we curtailed towards LGBTQ issues.
Latinos,
Culturally
LGBT, African
was
Americans,
not,
Muslims.
yeah, culturally was not a a favorable thing. I mean, maybe in Democratic states it definitely was, and to the base it was, yes, but to the independent voters, that was not the case. It was not something that was popular, and, Democrats knew that. They knew that the, you know, boys and men's bathrooms and the hormonal procedure changes that doctors were doing and things of that nature was good for their base, but it was not good for the overall electorate because they did not deem that as something that should be policy or even students or their children should be open to. And I could say that I completely agree that that cultural issue is something that hurt the Democratic Party because we were so focused on it. And we lost track on immigration, the economy, and we didn't own up any of the great changes and great achievements that they actually were able to get done.
Yeah, and I also wanna add that, the a lot of people, a part of being the party of the minorities is that minorities generally don't have one all-encompassing culture, you know what I mean? Like you mentioned, the LGBT, policies and taking that and shredding with it. A lot of Muslims, African American, and Latino people are conservative culturally. You know what I mean? To give you an example, Michael, of the difference of support amongst African Americans in general, from so the reason why Harris lost, Trump won was because of the men. You know, they voted
Yeah.
for Trump. They
Well,
from
I think white women too had something to do with that as well. I think they voted in pretty good substantials for Donald Trump as well.
Yeah, but, like, I was interested when I saw this on a clear gender basis. 53% of women voted Harris, 53% of men voted Trump. So it was literally 53-47 for each candidate flipped. But the interesting thing is amongst African American men, there was a 35% swing towards Trump.
Yeah, I could.
35%. And I think that when you're just talking about how so many pushing these ideas that are against so many people's cultures, like the African Americans are one of the most religious groups in the country, one of the most religious made up people in the country, very Christian and or very Muslim. You know, generally they're just one of the two faiths, but they're very culturally in part of it. And then you get the Latinos, very culturally Catholic. Then you get the Muslims, culturally Islamic. You know what I mean? And a lot of these people have a more liberal mentality, and the idea of they're like, live and let live. I don't care what people do. I don't want people to, force to oppress me. I'm not going to oppress others. So then when
Yeah.
the Democratic Party starts pushing this ideology of if you don't agree with us, you're wrong on this core cultural issue, then the people are thinking of, well, I don't want these people to force their ideology on me when it's completely against everything I think. You know what I mean? I don't care if people are LGBT, but I care when you're, as you mentioned, taking these stances of saying it's okay for men to be in women's bathrooms, X, Y, Z, etc. with that. The Republicans did a very good job, in my opinion, on running with that. Like
Yeah.
the loss in support amongst, this is another one, among African American men and Hispanic men, it was both a 35% swing towards Trump from Biden to Harris.
I can easily see that.
Yeah, and it's like
I can
people are
easily
saying,
see that.
but sure, I agree. There's definitely some men who just don't view a woman as a president being strong enough, maybe. But it's not, misogyny isn't the core reason why there was a nearly 50% swing the other way. It was because you were pushing a culture that was what these men didn't believe in. This
It's
LGBT.
just like the Maryland ruling as well.
Yeah,
That's literally it right there. You don't want your kids to be exposed to these things because they should not,
it
because
should not.
it doesn't help them in any way. They can
Yeah,
find out who they are on their own terms without getting information on these themes. But like, yes, as you were saying that, uh it's okay to be LGBTQ. We like it's supportive of that, but it doesn't need to be shoved down our throats, whether it's in school or in the public. We understand that there's obviously a appetite for that, and that individuals are out there in those themes and in that camp. But it's not something that we need to see every single day, whether it's from in this classrooms or dare I say it, in the bathrooms as well.
yeah,
I think it's I appreciate and that individuals are being themselves, but it's something that we don't need to have plastered across our education system and our policies as well. Protections for them, yes, that's perfectly fine. That's every group. deserves protections, deserves rights, but it's something that we don't need to be pushing towards our middle school and elementary school kids. More so just only on the high school and graduated level, where their minds are more adapt to take in those concepts and process those concepts.
I mean, it's not like, a lot of the people, in my opinion, who would be advocating for LGBT curriculum or lessons would also be very opposed to religious curriculum and lessons. So it really brings in the idea of it doesn't matter what you personally think is, what you personally are or agree with. It matters what you think the government should be capable of doing. Do you
Yeah,
think, even if you are LGBT and very proud of it, do you think the government should be allowed to teach people things that you don't agree with? What if all of a sudden the US takes a very Christian nationalistic turn and now we're learning about Christian history and very, biased views of things from the public school? What are you going to do now? What if all of a sudden your kids have to
actually
sit
gonna
down and
say,
listen about how LGBT is a sin and they're going to burn in hell for that? Like you would dislike that as well, just like you would dislike the idea of the government forcing anything in people's throats, which is
so
what
there's
so many people felt like.
I would say there's a stone to be turned over on the same issue. It's the Texas law that was made
The
that they are
commandments.
going to, yeah, the 10 commandments, which I think is, absolutely fine. But that goes into the same conversation as, if we're not okay with, LGBTQ being shared and those themes being shared, how can we also be okay with religious schools that aren't religious, you know, displaying these things or mandating these things being taught when you could have kids that are in different religions? So it's definitely a two-sided, it's the same issue, but it's two separate sides because I believe that, I mean, I could be completely wrong on this. I believe that religious religious thoughts and knowledge is more acceptable than LGBTQ themes when it comes to teaching in classrooms.
I agree.
I think a parent would be more outraged that their kids are learning LGBTQ themes instead of if they were learning, theology or something of that nature regarding to religion. Now, I could be completely wrong, but that's the sentiment that I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And it's only that feeling of the sentiment because being in in New Jersey, as I was saying, there's bills on banning those certain things in books. I have not seen anything banning any religious materials or imposing religious materials on books and in the schools as well. So that's why I have that perception of that last thought that I shared.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you bring that up because I am of the mind that I'm a very religious person. I've read the Quran. I'm working on. I've read it already. Working on reading it multiple times, and I'm working on reading the Bible actually because I think it's a fascinating book. But the Ten Commandments are nothing more but a moral guideline. But I think that it's a slope that we shouldn't start. Because the idea is of, well, if we're going to be beginning, enforcing this religious teaching in school, where is it going to end to an extent?
Yeah,
And there's no Ten Commandments are fine. Quite literally just says there's no other gods but me. Don't make idols. Don't murder people. And things like that. And I think that one of my issues with religious people in general is the hypocrisy. And I think that a it's better to actually work on putting in programs to show the Ten Commandments in action, aside from just placing them up in classrooms. Now, I'm just thinking as, when I was younger and growing up, and, we would have to do things like the Pledge of Allegiance every day and like the national anthem once a week. And then,
we still do it in committee meetings actually before they start.
oh, that's nice. I kind of miss doing it, to be honest. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. But I think that while it was nice, a simple idea, like, and I'm glad they haven't expanded on it in terms of nationalistic patriotism. But I think that it's better to, I'd ra- it was nice doing the pledge, don't get me wrong, like, I love this country, which is why I say that, but if I could have had a class, not a class, but if I could have had, like, a thing where once a month, you know what I mean, like, they take a different group of once a week, they take different group of kids to go down to, like, help with the, like, the homeless veterans, or, like, go down to the homeless shelter, help out with food
Yeah.
distribution, things like that. I think it's far better to actually take time to have this humanitarian effort for children and for the kids, instead of just putting up like, "Hey, this is what you should do." And I think that growing up in a religious household, that's a very common thing to experience, you being told one thing but seeing another, and I think that causes a lot of dissidence amongst people, and we see that a lot nowadays with why there's such a big push against, Christianity and Christian majority countries, and against Islam and Islam majority countries, is because these people grow up hearing about what they're supposed to be doing, the kind of lifestyle they're supposed to be living, and then their parents or people in their lives are doing the exact opposite of that. Like, let's say, for example, there in every book it talks about how cheating on your wife is one of the worst sins. The Bible and the Quran heavily say one of the 10 Commandments is literally you shall not cheat on your wife. No,
Mhm.
no adultery. Do not commit
Yeah.
adultery.
No adultery. Yep.
Then what's one of the most major sins? How many people in your life do you imagine have cheated on their significant other? And I know people personally who are preach to the choir in terms of what faith they choose, but then they have committed adultery. And it just brings up the idea of I think the reason why they put up the 10 Commandments in the classroom is so these kids learn the 10 Commandments. But I feel like it would be much better for actual learning to show the 10 Commandments in action instead of just putting them up.
Yeah.
So aside from my political issues with this, the fact that, well, where's it going to stop with the religious implementation of what they want to say? Because again, like, what if it's a school that wants to teach Islam? You know what I mean? The Christians,
Mhm.
the strong Christians would not be happy about that. What if it's a school that wanted to teach about Mormonism? A public school that wanted to take taxpayer money and teach about Mormonism? The other religious groups would not be happy about that. What about Judaism? I remember there was a case actually, and one of the liberal judges actually put up a good case about this. It was in regards to the Oklahoma charter school, that where they were looking to put in to use taxpayer money to make a religious school. And the woman said, "Well, I know how would these people feel if a school in New York, funded by taxpayer money, was just used to teach, about Israel, Judaism history, and these kids were only learning Hebrew, not even learning English." I'm like, there are definitely religions where these people are capable of simply learning their ethnic language. They don't have to learn English if they didn't want to. All right, so it's like saying, it's like, what if we have Buddhists, we have Hindus, we have Jews, we have Muslims. So if we're going to start saying that taxpayer money can be used to fund Christian schools, this is going to be the beginning of a greater schism in American culture, which is one
Yeah.
thing American culture does extremely well compared to a lot of other countries. Europe at the moment has a very large issue. Well, I don't want to spend too much time on this. We can spend enough time on it. We can spend more time on another episode because this is nearing 2 hours. So Europe has a very large issue at the moment with Muslim migrants and them just
Yeah.
not assimilating
Noticed
into
that.
the country. Yeah.
I've
It's like
noticed
these
that.
people from like Pakistan or such places will go to Germany and England, and then they won't adapt at all. They'll continue to live the way they lived in Pakistan. I'm like, there's a reason you left Pakistan. I understand that, you like your culture. I love my culture, my Bosnian culture and heritage. But my family came to America for a better opportunity, and we took on the culture of the country that let us in. You know what I mean? Like my family still,
To simulate.
yeah, we still do our Muslim holidays. We still fast every Ramadan. We still do literally everything that we did before, but we live by the American culture. You know what I mean? We celebrate July 4th, Thanksgiving. We do all that. We work with our Christian neighbors, with our church friends. We understand that people are different. This is the land of the free. Let people be how they want to be. Treat them with respect. And we've been treated with respect. And it's a issue where I feel like if America does that very well because it allows anybody to be anybody. Whereas if you go to the schools, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, whatever. You're just going to the school to go to the school. Whereas if we start pushing this idea that, well, they teach Christian ideology in schools, then it's like, well, is it an issue if my kid's not Christian then? Is it an issue if I'm not Christian? Like, where's this gonna end?
Yeah.
Let
Yeah, it's gonna be very interesting to see how the religious, landscape is in the next few years, without a doubt. I mean, I've seen reports, I mean, TikToks of, like, people saying New York is having a very huge increase of Muslim populations in there, and yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how the population changes too.
Yeah.
It could be that I know minority groups are growing, and birth rates of minority groups are growing, and birth rates of the white population the United States is actually shrinking, which is going to be very interesting down the line.
Honestly, I
Um,
I kind of always wonder this as like a joke, but also as semi-serious. I don't know if I'm considered a minority or not. I don't. I'm white, but I'm Muslim. You know what I mean? Like, am I a minority?
Technically, because you're white Muslim,
Yeah, because I'm
technically.
Muslim.
Well,
Yeah.
you would be, yeah. I mean, it really would be with what you
What I
signify
identify
as if
as.
more. Yeah, like isn't I would say probably identify as Muslim more than white, I would think.
Yeah, my name's Muhammad after all.
Yeah, but I would think, yeah, you're definitely in that minority group of individuals, just like myself. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I had a friend call me spicy white when I asked them that question. They're like, you're basically a minority." But,
That's funny.
I've enjoyed our conversation today, Michael. We're
Yeah,
touching a lot of base. Honestly, this conversation has led longer than I expected it to, but there's nothing wrong with that.
no, nothing wrong with that. I hope our viewers and listeners are excited about the level of conversation that we've had and excited about the continuation of this podcast. We look forward to having additional episodes covering, you know, cultural and or policy issues throughout the nation and in the states that we're focused in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. We look forward to any feedback, whether that's directed towards me or Muhammad. Please let us know of anything that we can do better or any other topics that you guys would like us to cover in upcoming episodes. We would be happy to do that. Also, look out for our social media pages coming soon.
Oh, yeah,
We'll
I
have
gotta launch the
direct,
Instagram and the YouTube.
yeah, which will have direct links for these podcasts as well as look out for our podcast that will be out soon. Well, once we get through all the first rigmaroles of everything. So we do appreciate everyone listening. And we hope you do tune in next time. And Muhammad, if you want to have some words for our listeners and viewers before we hop off.
Yeah, we're ironing out all the details, guys. You know, this is only going to get better, more informative, and also more of a flowing conversation. You know, so thank you everyone for listening on this first episode of this hopefully wonderful journey, as you get to learn more about life and politics in the Northeast and in general with us. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, I'll stop the recording there.